All right, excellent. So we'll now officially begin. Welcome everybody to Columbia Climate School's MS in Climate Finance virtual information session. We are extremely excited to be sharing more details about this brand new degree program. I know many of you have been anticipating this degree. You might have heard word about it earlier in the fall semester that we were planning on launching, and now it's officially launched. And we are actively recruiting for our inaugural class in fall 2025. So I'm Alfred Ayub. I'm going to go ahead and perform a brief presentation, providing you a broad overview of Columbia Climate School, also sharing some details as it relates to the partnership with Columbia Business School. I would say a critical ingredient to what makes this such a unique degree program. I'll also touch on the MS in Climate Finance curriculum and timeline, professional development opportunities within Columbia Climate School, financial aid, the application process. I always like to say the most riveting section is the application process, but I'm a little biased because I work in admissions. And then we will move into our faculty panel. And so the majority of this session is going to be hearing directly from our faculty, really the architects behind this program. So let me formally now introduce our faculty, and then at the end, we'll move into the panel. First is Lisa Sachs. Lisa Sachs is Associate Professor of Professional Practice at Columbia Climate School and Director of Columbia's MS in Climate Finance program. Professor Sachs is also the director of the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, also known as CCSI, which is a joint center of Columbia Climate School and Columbia Law School. Since joining CCSI in 2008, she established and oversees CCSI's interdisciplinary research and advisory work on the alignment of investment law, practice, and policy with sustainable development goals. She is globally recognized expert in the ways that laws, policies, and business practices shape global investment flows and affect sustainable development. She works with governments around the world, regional and international development organizations, financial institutions, companies, civil society organizations, and academic centers to understand the interrelation of investment flows and sustainable development, and to influence investment policies and practices to promote the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Also joining us today is Bruce Usher. Bruce Usher is a professor of professional practice and the Elizabeth B. Strickler and Mark T. Galogli Faculty Director of the Tamer Institute for Social Enterprise and Climate Change at Columbia Business School, as well as a professor of professional practice in the Faculty of Climate at Columbia Climate School. Professor Usher teaches courses on climate change, finance, and business, and is a recipient of multiple teaching awards. Prior to his work at Columbia, Professor Usher was CEO of EcoSecurities Group, which developed greenhouse gas emissions reduction projects in developing countries and was acquired by J.P. Morgan in 2009. Professor Usher is an active investor and advisor to entrepreneurial ventures focused on climate change and clean energy, and is chair of the Tamer Fund for Social Ventures. So I'd like to give a very warm welcome to both Professor Sachs and Professor Usher. You are going to be hearing from them shortly a little bit more about the MS in Climate Finance program. So let's look forward to that. So let me go ahead and give you a little bit of an introduction on Columbia Climate School itself. And let me go a little even further back and let's talk about Columbia University. So when we refer to Columbia University, we're referring to the fifth oldest university in the United States, the oldest in the state of New York, and to many is a blueprint of major research institutions in the world. So when you refer to Columbia University, you're referring to an institution that has over 20 different schools that fall underneath that umbrella term, Columbia University. The majority of those schools being professional schools, like the august Columbia Business School, one of the best business schools in the world. The newest school within Columbia University is Columbia Climate School. It was formally announced in 2020, launched in 2021, and our ethos is that the world requires knowledgeable leaders to work with businesses, communities, governments, and civil society to address the climate crisis. Columbia Climate School's graduate degree programs and other learning opportunities provide an interdisciplinary knowledge base for climate leaders with diverse interests and backgrounds. And you are going to hear the word interdisciplinary woven throughout this presentation. That is truly our mission. Climate touches everything. And we need to have students that are interdisciplinary in their lens, and our faculty are interdisciplinary by nature. Professor Sachs is a lawyer. Professor Usher is a preeminent finance professional. We also have professors that are earth and environmental scientists. We have professors that are architects and urban planners. Again, interdisciplinary is woven throughout Columbia Climate School. I also want to note, while we are a very new school, we were built with a very strong foundation within Columbia University. So interestingly, the Earth Institute was the largest research center at Columbia University. That has since evolved to Columbia Climate School, and also within the climate school is Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. We have hundreds of climate scientists that are affiliated with Columbia University, the largest number among any institution here in the United States. And we have a very, very long-standing history in studying climate change. Now I want to touch on Columbia Business School and this unique partnership as it relates to the MS in climate finance. I want to acknowledge this is a partnership. So the MS in climate finance program, this degree is a Columbia Climate School degree. That's the degree with which it's conferred. But I think the secret ingredient to this degree and what makes it especially unique and important and differentiates within the market is this unique partnership with Columbia Business School. The interdisciplinary collaboration of Columbia's expertise in finance with really cutting-edge climate research is going to prepare leaders to address the financial challenges of climate change. The program integrates the strengths of both schools, truly leveraging Columbia Business School's decades, and I want to lean into that, decades of leadership in sustainable business practices and climate innovation to equip students with the necessary skills for impactful careers in climate finance. So the MS in Climate Finance program is a one-year STEM designated program. I'm going to throw out there over the last week, that's probably the number one question we've been getting in our inbox. Is the program STEM designated? I'm very happy to say it is a STEM designated program. It's a 39 credit hour degree, and it's offered by Columbia Climate School, again in close collaboration with Columbia Business School. It integrates climate science with fundamental financial management practices that equip students with the financial decision-making skills to respond to climate change. Again, this program is going to give you the skills necessary to not only address the challenges of climate change, but think of the opportunities that come with it and the innovation needed to address it. The four overarching themes within this curriculum that you're going to see that's going to be touched on is, number one, you're going to understand the science of climate change and its varying economic, social, and environmental impacts. You're also going to translate the implications of climate research into appropriate financial and business language and decision making. You'll assess risks and opportunities associated with climate change. Risks is a big word in this program, and in fact, climate risk is one of your core courses. You'll also evaluate the financial tools and strategies that can be applied to accelerate the energy transition and to finance critical investments in mitigation and adaptation. So to give you an aerial snapshot of the MS in Climate Finance program, again, 39 credit hour, one-year program. It always begins in the fall semester. And so in that fall semester, you're going to be tackling both your climate core courses, the courses embedded within Columbia Climate School, along with beginning your finance core course journey. And in the spring semester, you'll continue with your finance core courses and also then delve into elective courses that are embedded within both Columbia Climate School and Columbia Business School. And then the summer semester is going to be elective courses, again, a continuation within Columbia Climate School and Columbia Business School, along with the ultimate kind of applied learning experience that we so firmly believe in at both professional schools. And that's the idea of either going to be completing a capstone workshop or alternatively an internship. Again, the idea of transforming those concepts that you learned in the climate core, the finance core, and directly applying them either to a capstone or internship. And I'll define what that looks like shortly. So this is going to be your climate course sequence, dynamics of climate variability and change. That's a course that teaches you kind of the physics behind climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. In fact, Professor Sachs teaches the climate change mitigation course. These are the principles behind addressing climate change. And then finally, international climate finance. I want to emphasize that many students have been asking us also about the climate justice component. Climate justice is woven throughout our curriculum here at Columbia Climate School. So all of these courses are going to be focusing on elements of climate justice, particularly international climate finance. And we'll hear from Professor Sachs a little bit more on that topic. In terms of the finance core, I want to emphasize again, this is a Columbia Climate School degree, but the courses within the finance core are Columbia Business School courses taught by Columbia Business School professors within the Columbia Business School footprint they're building. So these courses include foundations evaluation, corporate finance, capital markets and investments, climate finance, and climate risk. Quite a few of these courses are going to be taught over a half semester model. Capital markets and investments is taught over a full semester, but I just want to highlight there's a little bit of a difference in terms of how the climate core is taught over full semester sequences and much of the finance core, which is taught in either a term A or a term B sequence. In terms of that kind of transforming concepts into practice and the idea of either a capstone workshop or alternatively an internship, just to define this for you, if you perform the capstone, it's a live consulting project with an external client that would be sourced by the program, the MS in Climate Finance program. And partners each workshop partners a team of about 6 graduate students with a faculty advisor. And the goal is to provide clients with innovative analysis and practical recommendations while climate finance students gain expertise by working on a real world problem. So again, the capstone workshop is going to be more of a team-based exercise in a consulting capacity, whereas the internship, which is an alternative option, is going to be this hands-on immersive experience that takes place over the summer, and of course, a climate-related role. I should say climate finance related role. And again, this is going to offer students academic learning and real world challenges. You're going to gain that insight into financial strategies, driving climate action. This would be a New York City based internship that complements a virtual class meeting with our internships as well. And one thing I like to note, actually, I didn't say it from the top, although I'm sure our professors are going to highlight this. There's huge value in coming to the MS in Climate Finance program, considering where we're located, which is in New York City, the center of finance, the center of business in the world, the center of policy, quite frankly. So in terms of the climate school electives, one thing Professor Sachs wants me to note is that this is just a sample, and this is actually going to evolve a great deal. In fact, Professor Sachs, I'm certain, is going to share perhaps a preview of some additional electives that are going to be coming on board in the very near future. But these would be examples that you could take, for example, climate policy and investment, financing renewable energy, also, post-disaster recovery, housing and economic recovery. And then for the Columbia Business School electives, we include impact investing, investing in social ventures, climate policy, sustainability reporting. I do want to note that the MS in Climate Finance program truly is a program that is strictly going to be within Columbia Climate School and Columbia Business School. And so your electives is going to have certainly some flexibility, but we are going to give you a menu of electives to choose from within each school. I'll also touch on now career resources and professional development at Columbia Climate School. And Professor Sachs is going to want to also note that just more resources are going to come with this particular audience in particular. For example, we are absolutely going to be performing site visits to various organizations, both financial institutions and policy organizations. But in terms of the career resources, we do have a phenomenal dedicated career management office at Columbia Climate School. They host employer information sessions, of course, resume and cover letter reviews. We've hosted an alumni mentorship program across various partner programs at Columbia Climate School that's been extremely popular among our students. We also have sustainability skills seminars. So if you're interested in, for example, sustainability consulting or lead certification, we host around 12 sustainability skills seminars each year. Coming up in the next few weeks is the All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Career Fair. We're extremely excited about this event. We've been hosting it for over a decade at Columbia University, where we bring nearly 100 employers and around 1,000 students participate in this annually. We also have, of course, mock interview resources and an exclusive job board at Columbia Climate School. I'll also touch on financial aid. And something I want to really highlight is the Stanley Park Climate Finance Scholarship. This is a phenomenal opportunity. And in fact, I have a dedicated slide on this coming up next. So stay tuned. But this is a really wonderful opportunity that Professor Sachs was able to secure through a very generous donation. So I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. If anybody joining us in the audience is a veteran of the United States military, and you qualify for the post 9/11 GI Bill, it's possible that you also qualify for the Yellow Ribbon Program. And Columbia Climate School is also a proud member of the Yellow Ribbon Program. So if you have an interest in utilizing veterans education benefits, please reach out to our office. We can discuss more details about that. We also offer merit-based climate school scholarships for the MS in Climate Finance program. And interestingly, we just announced the program last week, and our deadline for admissions is April 1st. Some students were a little concerned, thinking, oh, is it too late for me to access merit scholarship consideration, considering when I'm applying? Everybody's applying now, of course. And so we do have dedicated resources available for climate school merit scholarships, specifically for the MS in Climate Finance program. There is no separate application for that consideration. So just by applying for admissions, you'll automatically be considered for those. We also encourage students to perform research on external fellowships. Columbia Climate School and Columbia University writ large has various directories of external fellowships that we share with our students. If you're interested in accessing those, we're more than happy to share those. And then we also have federal and private loan resources that we can discuss with you as well. So I want to spend a little bit more time discussing the Stanley Park Climate Finance Scholarships. This is an incredible opportunity. And again, we have to thank, as Columbia Climate School, we have to thank Professor Sachs for securing this incredibly generous donation that made this scholarship become available. So for our inaugural class, we are going to be offering 3 scholarships that cover the full tuition of the program, specifically the tuition. So there's not going to be, unfortunately, we're not covering living expenses. That's been a couple questions we've been receiving as it relates to that, but certainly the majority of the cost of this is going to be the tuition, and that's what this will be covering. It does require a separate scholarship application that is housed in our admissions application portal. So when you start the application for the MS in Climate Finance program, you're also able to gain access to the Stanley Park Climate Finance Scholarship. Again, in order to qualify for the Stanley Park Finance Scholarship, you have to be a full-time student in the MS in Climate Finance program. I should note that the MS in Climate Finance program is only for full-time students. That's something else I need to address immediately. It's only for full-time students, the program itself. This scholarship does have not only a merit component, but also very significantly a demonstrated financial need component. So the application for the Stanley Park Finance Scholarship will be asking financial questions relating to your personal finances. You need to display demonstrated financial need to be competitive for this. And it's the scholarship's intention is for contributing to the public nonprofit sectors, and in particular, those from countries with emerging and developing economies. And also, we're seeking candidates with a deep interest in addressing the distortions of climate finance and promoting solutions to substantially increase climate investments. So again, we have this separate scholarship application. We're very, very excited to launch this, and this is going to be 3 full scholarships for our inaugural fall 2025 class. In terms of the online application process, I want to just note before I go through the list, the review is a holistic review. Our admissions committee is going to be deeply interested in understanding your motivations and goals for studying climate finance. They're going to be deeply interested in understanding kind of what perspective or lens you're going to be bringing to the learning community. So I want to emphasize that and note we don't have, so often we're getting emails also, do you have a minimum GPA? We don't have a minimum GPA. That being said, this is going to be a competitive process. So I'll briefly run through the online application. In terms of the online system, you are going to upload a traditional resume. And then we have a second unique document that we're asking for, which is a quantitative resume. And my colleague Damaris Diaz, who is helping with specifically the Q&A and answering many of your questions, will be sharing a document, or forgive me, a URL that gives you an outline of what that quantitative resume, what kind of format we're looking for, what you should be highlighting. Essentially, you're going to be highlighting quantitative coursework that you perform both in undergraduate as well as possibly graduate school, and then also quantitative projects that you worked on as a professional. We also require 2 letters of reference. One of those letters should be academic if you've been enrolled in a college or university within the last 5 years. However, if it's been more than 5 years since you've been enrolled in a college or university, you can use 2 professional recommendation letters. That's completely appropriate. We also ask for all of your unofficial college transcripts. So for example, if you attended, let's say, the University of Virginia for your MBA and you went to NYU for your undergraduate degree, we would both need your University of Virginia transcript along with your NYU transcript. And these can be unofficial, uploaded to the application portal. We also have an English language test requirement for the MS in Climate Finance. If English is not your native language and it was not the language of instruction in your university, so you could either take the TOEFL, the IELTS, or the Duolingo English test. And then finally, of course, the ever so critical statement of purpose. The application deadline is April 1st, 2025. That is a firm deadline. So everybody joining the call today that is interested in attending fall 2025 must submit their complete admissions application by April 1st, 2025. We are planning on releasing decisions in late April 2025. And then in terms of the Stanley Park Scholarship, Climate Finance Scholarship, that application is due 1 week later, which is April 7th, 2025. Interviews are mandatory for the Stanley Park Climate Scholarship. So if you're one of the finalists, you will be invited for an interview. And again, that deadline is April 7th, 2025. I'll just briefly touch on the statement of purpose. We want you to share your key experiences that have contributed to your commitment to work on climate change issues. What are your academic and professional goals, and what knowledge and skills are you hoping to develop through enrollment in the MS in Climate Finance program? And then finally, which climate core and finance core course are you most excited to complete, and why? So maybe perhaps climate mitigation is the course that you're most jazzed about on the climate core side, and maybe climate risk or climate finance on the finance core side. Share that with us. Again, you have up to 1,000 words. You don't have to use all 1,000 words, but you have up to 1,000 words for the statement of purpose. So now I would like to go ahead and pivot to our phenomenal faculty. And I think you're going to get a lot out of hearing directly from Professor Sachs and Professor Usher, specifically for this panel. I'm just going to briefly stop sharing my screen so we can really just expand the faces. And then I'd like to go ahead and begin with the question. So why don't I start with question 1, and maybe I'll start with Professor Sachs. Lisa, why is it critical to study climate finance now?
Great, thanks so much. Thanks for that wonderful presentation, Alfred, and for all of you joining. I'm admittedly extremely excited about this program and to talk about it. I have been working in energy-related investments for my whole career, for 20 years, and the energy transition is irrevocably underway, and it's absolutely necessary for a variety of reasons to meet the massively increasing demand for energy, for diversified sources of energy, to bring down costs and to stabilize costs for users and for industrial processes, to build resilience into our economy, for more energy independence, which is taking on increasing importance all over the world. So the energy transition is underway and we need it. The technological pathways are known, the technologies are generally available. The major question is, how do we finance this major investment? Where are the opportunities for investment? Where are the roadblocks for investment? Who are the actors that are necessary to finance this? So that's why this is absolutely critical right now. I also should note that for those in the financial sector, extreme weather events are increasing and are really impacting how companies operate and strategize, how sectors are valued, and so on. So it is my sincere conviction that those who understand these impacts and these imperatives and these opportunities and how finance flows in energy systems will be best positioned to succeed in this unprecedented economic transformation.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And Professor Usher, why study climate finance now?
Let me just add to what Professor Sachs had to say. I agree with every point she made, but what I would add to is essentially the big picture here is a finance professional and someone who worked in the sector for many decades and then in climate finance for many years, and then now as an educator in this area, an academic. The big picture is that we've spent about 300 years building a global economy and financing a global economy that is tremendously productive in so many ways. But there's a catch, as you all know, I think, by joining this session. The catch is, of course, it emits greenhouse gases, and it's leading to ultimately to catastrophic climate change. And so we now need to rebuild that global economy in the next, not 300 years, but probably in the next 3 decades. And rebuilding economy requires investment. Without finance, without investment, you cannot build anything. And so we're now entering a phase where over the next several decades, we will be refinancing and rebuilding that global economy. And just to put the numbers in context, already today, 2024, significantly more finance, more capital is going into renewable energy globally than into fossil fuels globally. So already the amount of capital flows, the amount of financing in this sector is a very, very large investment opportunity. Again, larger than traditional industries, and that's only going to grow in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think this is my next question is a little two-part, so forgive me for this, but I think it's interesting that we're wedding these two distinct disciplines. And why is the climate core and the finance core critical for individuals wishing to enter the climate finance space? And if I could add one more question too, because it's interesting, why should students be eager to attend this program versus perhaps a traditional business school? And I'll maybe if we could start with hearing Professor Usher.
So first of all, you can't do climate finance without understanding finance, right? The prerequisite to doing any sort of climate finance, understanding the basics of finance. And the way we've structured this degree program is the finance basics you get are the exact same as MBA programs. So those core courses that Alfred mentioned in his presentation, foundations, evaluation, corporate finance, capital markets, these are the same courses as in the MBA program and the same professors as in the MBA program. And so we think it's essential that you get those basic finance tools in order to tackle the climate challenge. That being said, this is a different program from traditional 2-year MBA program. This program, the MS in Climate Finance, designed for students, for applicants who know what they want to do upon graduation. They know that they want to work on climate change. They feel they know that they want to work in climate finance, whether in the public sector or private sector. And we'll talk about careers in a few minutes. I think we'll get to that issue. But those who want to specialize, the MBA program is a broader program. It's a more generalist program for those who want to look at more than just a sort of a narrow focus.
Excellent. And Professor Sachs.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let me add just one comment on that. I noticed that one of the questions in the Q&A was about my bold but very true and exciting claim that this is the first program of its kind in the US and what makes this program distinct from others, especially I think the comment noted programs on sustainability and ESG and others. And by the way, I'm a proud graduate of a program in public policy. I've worked in those areas too, but there is no program like this that, as Professor Usher says, incorporates the core foundational finance courses. And by the way, core foundational courses in climate science, which the climate school was the first of its kind in the country to pioneer too. I'm teaching the climate change mitigation course. I can tell you that it is an incredible broad and also deep overview of all of the different pathways and sectors and how they transition. You have core courses in adaptation, core courses in international finance and how international finance flows. So it is really the fact that you're bringing these two disciplines together and mastering them that makes this really a one-of-a-kind program.
If we could now transition to Professor Usher, could you tell us about the work Columbia Business School has performed in the climate space? I referenced it's been decades, but if you could like give a little bit more color to that.
So Columbia Business School, I believe, has the largest climate change program of any business school in the world today. And this surprises some people because Columbia Business School is a pretty traditional business school, to be frank. We have this very large program because we recognize that we need to educate students for not just what's happening this year on the planet, but what's going to be happening over the next several decades. We're educating people for their entire careers. And we believe here at Columbia Business School, and certainly across Columbia University, that climate change is going to be one of the leading challenges, one of the most important challenges over the lifetime of our graduates. And so we really focus on this. We have 3 full-time faculty focusing on nothing but climate change, both in their teaching and their research. We have deep domain expertise in climate finance, climate risk, business and sustainability programs. And then we have about a dozen full-time faculty who teach sustainability related courses. So Columbia Business School has been very dedicated to this space for a number of years now. But that's within the broad MBA program, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. That's a very broad program. The opportunity here, and I'm extremely excited about this program, is the opportunity, again, to work with students who want to focus specifically on climate finance. And again, take the resources that we've developed here on climate change, the business school, and really leverage those for those students who want to focus in the climate finance area.
Thank you. And Professor Sachs, if you could pivot now to your role as the director of Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the work the center has been doing in this space.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it's all relevant to the program because it's the 16 years of experience working with so many different stakeholders around the world through CCSI that I'm bringing to bear and thinking with Professor Usher about the core topics that our students should know, what's changing in the world today, who are the actors that we can work with, and so on. So just very briefly, at CCSI for 16 years, we are very much an applied research center. So we work with international institutions and organizations, UNFCCC, Coalition of Finance Ministers, regional groups like the ASEAN Secretariat, the African Union, expert groups who are working on issues of the intersection of climate and debt. We work with organizations that are working on scaling catalytic capital, both philanthropic and blended capital institutions. And we work a lot with the private sector that are hedge funds and venture capital that are trying to strengthen their methodologies and approaches to having impact in the climate space. So we have grown a wonderfully diverse and engaged network over these nearly 2 decades that are all very excited to come work with our students, to come share the way that they're thinking about these issues, how they're seeing the issues evolved. They're excited for students to come work with them and visit their organizations and intern with their organizations. But it also has really given us a pulse on what the challenges are and where we need really more expertise and more thinking to advance critical solutions.
Excellent. And I think a question that we keep seeing coming in the Q&A, but definitely both of you can shed significant light on it. Certainly, Professor Sachs, what type of students should enter this program?
I can start on that. I will say that hearing from interested students over the past week has been remarkable, not only wonderful and fun, but also remarkable to really hear the diversity, the truly diverse range of practitioners, both early in their career and seasoned professionals who really see the value in this. And those who, and so unhelpfully, Alfred, I have to say that I don't think that there's one particular type. We have been hearing from those who have had careers in the finance sector and are realizing the value of learning more in depth about climate and the climate trajectories and climate technologies, those who have been in the climate sector and realize they really need to understand the finance foundations and approaches, those who are working in public institutions and in private institutions, public officials who have a mandate to achieve certain energy or climate related goals. I've heard from students in consulting practices, those working with businesses or those working with environmental impact assessments, and those in civil society who are advocates and activists for more rigorous and robust and accountable policies, and how to actually achieve some of the goals that the country, the world has agreed to. So to my mind, this is relevant for all of them. What I will say is that I can't really think of any institution truly that is not going to have to grapple in some way with the changing climate and changing imperatives and their role in thinking about the risks and thinking about the opportunities and thinking about the role of the financial system and so on, and addressing that going forward. So I really see, and I think the diversity of those students coming together will enrich the experiences for all.
And speaking of which, somebody previewed the industries when we were discussing, but what type of industries or roles can students anticipate entering following the degree program? And if we could hear Professor Usher first about that topic.
So first of all, I would agree with what Professor Sachs said, that every business pretty much globally is going to grapple with climate change in some way, whether from the risk side or from the opportunity side in the future. And so from that sense, I think any business or industry has a potential opportunity here going forward. More specifically, though, the opportunities we're seeing today are in the industries that have already become very large, let's say at scale, and are growing rapidly. And those are really three very significant industries today. Anything to do with renewable energy, particularly solar and wind. As I mentioned already, large in the fossil fuel industry. The second industry would be transportation, specifically automobile transportation, rapidly becoming electrified globally, and anything to do with energy storage, which is sort of intermediary in the industry. And those three industries are three of the largest industries in the world today, and already seeing tremendous demand for skills, both from the industry side and from the investor side. So for example, within investment banks, you'll see entire teams working on financing those sectors. Specific to employment opportunities, we're seeing particularly strong interest among financial firms. Again, that's banks, private equity, asset management, and among consulting firms. Those two areas doing a lot of activity in these sectors.
And Professor Sachs, maybe if we could speak to the public sector opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, it should be evident, but I will just say what a privilege and a joy it has been to develop this program with Professor Usher, because I think we have very complementary perspectives, fully aligned, but complementary histories of engagement in the sector. If anything, my focus for my career has been more in the international space, more in thinking about the challenges facing emerging markets and developing countries, but actually also very much from the opportunities that those provide for financial institutions in the US and others, and trying to think about how to address, how to bring the capital from where it mainly is, in the US and in Europe to where it's predominantly needed. In that capacity, I work a lot with development finance institutions, international financial institutions, and a lot of kind of more regional banks and regional organizations that are really trying to think about, and credit rating agencies and others. And so it's been fun to talk with Professor Usher and realize that these core courses that we're talking about are as relevant and as critical for practitioners in these very, very distinct roles in the public sector around the world and so on.
Excellent. All right, so now we are going to open up Q&A, and full disclosure, my colleague Tamer has been pooling questions. So we've been grabbing some really exciting questions that we feel could be very helpful for many of you. So I will kick off one of the questions that was asked, and maybe this is most appropriate for Professor Usher. The question is, will the finance-specific courses provide the level of detail necessary to structure various financial mechanisms, such as debt for nature swaps and blue carbon bonds? In other words, will students graduate with highly specific technical skills or more generalist knowledge?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm going to give us a somewhat in the middle answer to Alfred. In other words, you get very specific skills in finance and how to structure transactions and all the finance basics, and certainly some learning of financial tools specific to climate change. For example, debt for nature swaps is something I do teach in one of my courses. So yes, you'll get that. But I want to be clear, these degree programs, this sort of master's programs, it's not technical training in the sense that we train you specifically how to then step into a role and just execute the transaction. That's not what a master's degree does. So it's a balance. You'll have all the basic skills you need, and that's why we think employers are very excited about this program, because they can then take graduates and give them that little extra, experience they need to actually execute transactions. We think it's the right balance in that sense.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor Usher. And I think if you don't mind, there's one more that I think could be good is for students coming from a traditional finance background, what new perspectives or skills do you envision them gaining from the climate finance focus?
Yeah. So first of all, if they have the finance skills that we cover in our core finance courses, you can test out of those. We also have the same thing in the MBA program. If you already have those finance skills, you don't have to take the core courses. You can test out, and then of course you can take more electives. So that's an opportunity, of course, to do that. The point is, to your question, climate finance, addressing climate change requires us to invest investment capital. That's what I just mentioned earlier a few minutes ago. But you need to understand two skill sets, the finance basics, and then how do you apply that to addressing climate change, climate mitigation, climate adaptation. And that set of skills, that knowledge is what this program brings to bear. And so any finance professional, unless they already been very involved in the climate sector, this will be new material and knowledge for them.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question that came in is, this is an interesting question. What distinctive, and perhaps Professor Sachs could answer this one, what distinctive narrative and perspectives is the program seeking to bring to the field of climate finance and climate justice in particular?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I wouldn't say we're advancing any particular narratives. Quite the contrary. To my mind, this field of climate finance is even the concept of climate finance is a massive umbrella term, underneath which there are many, many ways in which finance and climate intersect. And so there's not a particular narrative of the program. Although I think understanding those intersections, understanding the roles and the impacts on different actors, how finance flows, where finance does not flow, and why, what the particular challenges are for certain sectors, but I would say even more so for certain geographies, that should be well understood by everyone graduating from this program. We should understand where finance flows and where it doesn't, where financing is most urgently needed, who are the players who help to accelerate that, what's needed to accelerate that, and so on. That's very much, to my mind, a question of global justice, global decency. The climate challenge is a global challenge. It affects all of us, all sectors, and so on. And so the disparities in climate finance and the disparities in access and impacts is inherently related to climate justice. In the International Climate Finance Core course, we'll certainly focus on that aspect, which is looking from a global perspective at capital and where it flows, where it doesn't, who might have the responsibilities for financing, who is bearing most of the impacts, and so on. But again, I would just emphasize that, to my mind, these are just important things for anyone in finance and in climate to understand. And if I can just go one step back to Professor Usher's comment in the last question about what one can walk away from, whether it's technical skills or otherwise, I really think understanding the landscape of climate and finance and what are the challenges we're trying to achieve or address, and how should we be thinking about these issues? Who are all the different actors? Really, that broad landscape. I can tell you that many wonderful practitioners in finance and in climate don't have that holistic perspective. So I think leaving with even that understanding of all of the ways in which climate and finance intersect will be a great asset in any role going forward. And so I hope that answers that great question.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. Another question, I think I could answer this one, but why not just hear directly from you, Professor Sachs, on this? We do have a number of students that are interested, but they're professionals, and the MS in climate finance is geared toward full-time students. does Columbia expect the program will expand in the future for more flexible? Would there be a part-time option in essence? Is there a vision for that or not at this time?
Now I'm curious, Alfred, whether I'll have the same answer as you.
Oh,
Because you throw it to me, what I will say is we we are always thinking about new ways to expand our teaching. And already there are, learning workshops and other programs. You see already this year, there are a number of different master's programs at the climate school. Of course, there's the MBA. So definitely still thinking about how to make that possible. It's not going to be possible. It's not going to be possible for this 2025, 2026 year. But we're always thinking, always innovating. Alfred, is that what you would have said?
absolutely. Yep. Non-commit. No, joking.
Okay,
So excellent. We got one more that's I feel like but just in case if you have another flavor or take, Professor Sachs or Professor Usher, a question that came in is why was the climate finance program launched at Columbia Climate School and what specific goals does it aim to achieve? I think we've touched on that quite a bit, but if there's anything else you would want to emphasize about this program in particular. Yeah, maybe Professor Sachs. Yeah, we want to go. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I would love to. I'm very curious about, but the way I see climate change and the energy transition, which I've been working on forever, is that it is at its core a question about asset allocation, about financing. It's not, it involves so many different sectors and technologies and so on, but it is made possible by understanding how we're going to finance this. Finance is an absolutely core sector. So I'm just absolutely delighted that the climate school was had the foresight to recognize that the questions of finance are absolutely core to what the climate school is trying to achieve, what is achieving, which is really taking interdisciplinary approach to addressing this generational challenge. It would have been a major gap, in my view, to be working on climate without considering the central role of finance. And it's just such a privilege and really incredible that this program brings together two of the best faculties at Columbia, but in the US, in the world, who are working on these issues. And so to have this partnership, it makes sense to me that it's a climate school program, but to have it in partnership with the business school is an extraordinary gift.
And Alfred, allow me to add that, developing this program was partly due to the success that the business schools had with another program with the engineering school in business analytics. Several years ago, we started a business analytics degree. Again, a one-year degree program, nothing to do with climate change, different audience, but it's been highly successful. And that degree is administered and issued by the engineering school at Columbia, with the business school providing core business courses that are relevant to that degree. And we found that there's a very successful partnership. And so with that success under our belt, we felt that this one for climate, clearly it should be a climate school degree. It's in climate finance. If someone's looking for a finance degree, it's not climate, they should do an MBA. But for those who want climate finance, this is a climate school degree. And we think that's absolutely the right structure and are extremely optimistic about how that's going to work going forward.
I will say, if I could just take a moment, quite a few questions are coming in that maybe are more administrative based questions for the admissions office. So I do have a one-on-one appointment calendar. You're welcome to book time with me to speak in more detail about the application process at a very, very high level. Some questions that came in is, when will the decisions be released? The admissions decisions should be released by late April 2025. In terms of another question relating to merit scholarships, what is the typical range? Merit scholarships range, again, those are the scholarships that are offered just by applying. There's limited scholarships, but if you're offered one, they can range anywhere from $10,000 to upwards of $35,000 for a merit scholarship. It's been that range. Another question is, how many years of work experience do you require? This can, what I want to emphasize in what Professor Sachs and Professor Usher shared is the idea that this is going to be a program that could meet the needs of many different types of audiences. Whether you're coming to this, I literally had a one-on-one with somebody that has an MBA from Darden, for example, and then I had a one-on-one appointment recently with a student that just started a career at Deloitte as an analyst. These could be good experiences for both of these student profiles. So there's no minimum years of work experience for the MS in Climate Finance program. I think what this admissions committee is deeply interested in, and I want to lean into that, is creating a very diverse learning community. And what I mean by that is individuals from very different lived experiences, professional experiences. You can already see that and hear the thematics. Professor Usher has this like deep private sector background. Professor Sachs is deeply committed to the public sector. Perhaps if we create a learning community where we have students from both of these sectors kind of within this cohort, it's only going to add, to and elevate the overall classroom experience. And I also want to note that you as a student should be very deeply interested in the network, meaning the idea that you're coming to Columbia University, you're not only coming from the incredible faculty and the wonderful administrative resources, but you're coming to learn with the cohort. So we're going to be developing a very diverse cohort from that perspective. And you also, and forgive me, now I'm going to make another pitch, but I think it's important to note, I didn't emphasize it enough, is that you will be in climate core courses with Columbia Climate School students in both our MA program and MS in Climate program, but you will also, through your electives at Columbia Business School, there's a menu of electives. You'll be among students within Columbia Business School's other degree programs. So you're gonna have an opportunity to intersect and exchange ideas and engage with a very wide array of students at Columbia University, both really focused on climate as well as students focused on finance and business, of course. Let's see if there's any other interesting question that came in. Another question that came in is how does the program approach climate finance solutions in developing economies with limited financial infrastructure? Okay, I like to hear that question. That's a more academic question for our faculty. So
Alfred, can you just say it one more time? Say it one more time.
Absolutely. So the question is, how does the program approach climate finance solutions in developing economies with limited financial infrastructure?
Yeah, that's my field. So that will definitely be a big part of the program. That will be covered in the international climate finance course in particular. We're doing a lot of work to understand both what needs to be financed in emerging markets and what are the barriers to emerging markets of developing countries and accessing affordable capital. If I get started on that, we're going to have to use the whole second hour. But I'll just say that there's, of course, a lot of work being done on that globally in practitioners and with the Finance for Development process, which we're very closely involved with, the G20 process, which we're very closely involved with and supporting, and other processes that are looking at how to build out the financial infrastructure in developing countries, but also to look at some of the systemic barriers that have been limiting financial flows to developing economies. So for those who are interested, we'll definitely not only cover that in the core for everyone, but have more opportunities to delve into that for those particularly interested in developing countries.
Excellent.
Alfred, could I just add a comment to it's not exactly the question that was asked, but I think it's important to communicate to applicants that climate finance differs from traditional finance in a couple of ways. But one important way is we believe it's very important for anyone who wants to work in climate finance to understand both the private sector opportunities and challenges and the public sector opportunities and challenges, because climate finance almost always intersects with policy and other sort of social mechanisms. And so that's why it's so important that students, even if they're thinking, I'm going to work in the private sector, I want to work, say, for an investment bank or a consulting firm, it's really important that they understand holistically what climate finance is from the international perspective, from the policy perspective, and that's why those are part of the core courses. And then, of course, they could specialize maybe in the public sector, the private sector, and vice versa. Those who want to work in the public sector in the area where Lisa has, Professor Sachs has more experience, I think it's very important to understand the private sector perspective, the opportunities and challenges here. And so that's different from traditional finance, where people tend to very early sort of track one way or the other.
Can I add to that too? But actually two things that I exactly on that point that I just want to say one more thing on, and then something else I think would be great for the participants to hear. So just exactly on that point, Professor Usher, thanks so much for mentioning that. As I said kind of earlier on, I think this concept of climate finance is not well defined by others. And for our program in particular, as Professor Usher said, it's multifaceted, but I would even think of it in at least two major distinct ways, which students should have exposure to both, even if they specialize in each, which is what are the implications and opportunities of climate change and the energy transition for finance and for the financial sector. And these are the questions that those in the financial sector are grappling with all the time and could use more skills. And then how do we actually finance climate action? And how do we finance climate related goals? Which are two kind of different dimensions. They have some overlaps, but they also have some differences. The core will absolutely touch on both so that students understand the distinction and the distinct challenges. But then again, as Professor Usher said, you can specialize in each of those. And the other thing that just made me want to say that I want to just mention is that building on the wonderful networks of both the climate school and the business school, we will have a very steady stream of amazing practitioners from all of these sectors, from, of course, Wall Street, our neighbor, but from public and private financial firms, from the public sector, from developing countries who are grappling with these issues. And I expect that we'll be hearing from them weekly, if not more, and so that students can really both engage with these critical challenges as they're as the practitioner dealing with them, but also build out their own network in with those practitioners who are working in their particular areas of interest.
Alfred, if I could make one last comment. I know we're almost out of time. You want to
Please
wrap
do.
up, but I want to comment because it hasn't come up yet, although it's sort of a question alluded to it. You know, the current political environment and interest and demand for climate finance and just to address climate change broadly. And I've been working in this area of climate change, climate finance for about 25 years now. It's a long time. And what I've seen in that period is that the trend is very clear. Climate change is becoming more serious. The amount of capital investment going in this area is becoming larger. Everything's trending upwards, but it's not a straight line. We go through periods where politically there's setbacks, politics come and go, things change, sometimes very rapidly. And that's just part of the process. I don't want to, I don't want to minimize the impact of these political changes. They can, of course, slow the change that we need. They can slow the amount of capital investment, and of course, they can impact the career and job opportunities. I won't minimize that, but here's what I'm hearing from professionals in the industry today. What I'm hearing is, until quite recently, there was, a lot of talk that companies were taking action, and perhaps we could even describe some of that as greenwashing, exaggerating what they're doing. Today, there's the opposite. Very few companies and business leaders want to talk about climate change because of the political issues around that. But in fact, what we're being told is their activity hasn't really changed. They're still investing. They're still doing the same activity at the business level. And that's what really matters when it comes to employment. So I just want to put that in context. I don't want to ignore the fact that we've got some political changes going on, of course, and there will be more changes in the future, for better or worse. But at the end of the day, they don't really affect the business activity a great deal.
Well, that does bring us to time. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Professor Sachs and Professor Usher for making time to really shed light on this really, really, really interesting opportunity. Again, the first MS in Climate Finance program ever launched. So we're so excited. And for anybody that joined the session and perhaps your specific question didn't get answered, feel free to book an appointment with myself. Feel free to email us at admissions@climate.columbia.edu. We'd love to hear from you. And I'll just say this, we have a round 2. So we actually have a March session scheduled. If you want to come again and hear both from Professor Usher and Professor Sachs, by all means, please feel free to register for our second MS in Climate virtual info session. The final element I want to note, the application is live. I believe many of you already started the application, but now is the time to continue the application. So the MS in Climate Finance application is live. April 1st is the deadline. Take advantage of that April 1st deadline, and we so look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor Sachs, and thank you, Professor Usher.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.